I'm sure you're tired now, David.
Oh, God, am I ever.
Where are you at the moment?
I haven't a clue.
You...
But looking at all the kilted roadies around me, I would imagine it's probably Scotland.
Oh, cool, okay.
And even more specifically, I think probably Aberdeen, which actually is not a bad place to be. It's nice, Aberdeen.
Well, not necessarily in any chronological order. We're looking at a diary of almost 3 decades. David...
Good God.
Yeah. Make you feel old, does it?
You're not talking about me, sir. You are, unfortunately.
I'm glad to say that we are.
Wow.
Currently on tour with the Outside album and the Outside tour. Just touching on the beginning of the David Bowie career. All those years ago with Mick Ronson.
Yes.
How did you write together? Do you read music, or was that Mick?
No, I never ever learnt to read music. In fact, before I met Mick, I did an album for Decca. I think the outlet at that time was called DRAM.
Right.
And I knew exactly what I wanted all the instruments to play. I wanted to have strings and bassoons and things like that.
Yeah.
And so my friend and I even remember his name. His name was Derek Fernley. Derek Fernley.
Yeah.
We bought a copy of something like the Encyclopedia of Music or something like that. And we figured out how to write all the notes.
You're joking.
No.
Yes, you are. I don't believe it.
I'm not.
I don't believe it.
It's absolutely true. And when we took it into the studio for the musicians to read, I mean, they were so kind.
Yeah.
Because they kind of figured out what we were trying to do, and they really helped us through it, which says a lot for session men. They're usually thought of as such a disgruntled,
right.
bored, cynical lot, but they were actually so charming and lovely, and got us through it,
You know, it's funny. I thought that was a strategic career move to all those years ago to have appeared as a lad insane, but there was a method to your madness.
Each note was looked up in a book. And by the time I got to Mick, I'd learnt enough sort of, just fiddling about on the piano and the guitar to be able to sort of work out what it should sound like anyway.
Sadly, Mick is no longer with us.
I know, God bless him, yeah.
They were good times, David, were they?
Yes, yes. He was just a real strength, a real great guy to work with. Provided many a magic musical moment.
And what of the Spiders from Mars? I believe that the other members wanted to carry on going the way they were going forever, whereas DB wanted to move on.
I'm afraid so. I believe what's happened now, Trevor, I believe he went off and worked with a band called Uriah Heep, and in fact stayed with them for many, many years. And Woody Woodmansey, actually the drummer, became a Scientologist and moved to Greenwich, which is the headquarters of Scientology in London.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge is actually still there.
Your time in Berlin, art, Iggy, 70s equivalent to all-night raves, memories?
It was a bit, yes.
Memories?
Yes, it was. It was a fascinating city because, of course, when we were living there, it was probably going through, in its own way, a kind of a little renaissance artistically. There were a lot of painters coming out of Berlin at that time.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting music, and the Dusseldorf sound had come down. That is the kind of the tech sound of Connie Plank and Kraftwerk and all those guys.
Oh, cool.
So it was a kind of a combination hybrid sound in Berlin, in the late night clubs, which was sort of punk techno, almost what one would now call industrial dance. So that was sort of a big sort of major influence for Eno and I, because Eno came over and started working with me.
Brian Eno, yeah.
And I guess the high point of that, it might sound like a very small high point, but for me, I thought it stuck out as being something quite funny, is that he rushed into my apartment one day and said, "I've heard the sound of the future."
Yeah, I read this, yes.
And this is absolutely true. And he put on this record, and it was Giorgio Moroder's recording of Donna Summer's I Feel Love.
Yes.
And he said, listen, this is pure genius.
Yeah.
And he played it over and over and over again. This is what it's all going to sound like from now on. This is a new starting point.
When you were working with Brian...
I'm kind of surprised our album didn't sound more like that, but somehow we managed to avoid sounding like Donna Summer, which in some ways is quite unfortunate.
Absolutely, very credible, Donna Summer. Around about the time you're working with Brian Eno, would this have been around about the same time as your work with Fripp?
Yes, that's
Robert?
indeed. Chronologically, I worked with Iggy first, and we did The Idiot in a fairly quick succession, actually. We did The Idiot, then we did Low.
Yeah.
Then I think
Lodger?
Then I think we did Lust for Life again with Iggy,
Right.
and then I worked with Brian and Fripp on Heroes, and
Cool.
and we ended up with Lodger, which featured some Fripp, but a lot of Adrian Blue by then.
Yeah. Is David Bowie smug about the Lodger, Low, Scary Monsters, Heroes albums? Because, self-satisfied, because they were credible albums for generations.
They did have a good fan base, but you know something, they really didn't achieve any critical acclaim at the time. The song Heroes did itself, but we got some fairly damning reviews at the time. They didn't like what we were doing. They felt, I think generally it was felt cold and removed and too arty and hey, does this sound familiar? It's sort of, I think it really took some people quite a long time to get into it, and they weren't easy albums. I mean, I think once you played them quite a few times, but boy, you had to play some of them quite a few times. Once you'd gotten familiar with them, I think they became kind of really. Yeah. They were albums that didn't wear out quickly either. I mean, you can really play them for many years, I think, and get some kind of satisfaction out of them.
I think David Bowie, as an artist, spanning the whole career, really, you've been a bit of a Bob Dylan. Looking at your record sales, not so many hits. You've had a couple of number ones.
That's right. That's pretty accurate. That's very much how I feel as well. It's sort of,
But yet, everybody knows you. Everybody, from the Amazon basin, to Beckenham, they know of David Bowie. It's amazing.
Oh yes, those folks in the Amazon basin.
Yeah. Sting, forget the trees. Well, it's an older, wiser, and somewhat cosmopolitan, well-travelled David Bowie that emerges these days. And I guess really, perhaps you don't feel the need to recreate that state of mind you're in. After all, that was a time, a place, and you were a different person, yeah?
Yes, I think very much today. I think I still, if there's anything that sort of is a link with any of that period, is that I probably, when I'm not absolutely shattered and tired,
I know.
I do have I have the same curiosity probably that I had then.
Good. Well, that's a motivation in itself.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. I think it just keeps you wanting to regurgitate all the experiences that you kind of have.
Absolutely. There was the wonderful White Soul, or was that the Blue-Eyed Soul?
Blue-Eyed Soul, the Young
called
Americans
it then.
period.
That's right. In America, late 70s, and the Cracked Actor.
Well, actually, that was bang in the middle. That was
75.
We started work on, I guess, the embryonically, just the end of 74, and then into 75. Yeah. And it kind of, I guess, in its own way, led to things like the Bee Gees' Saturday Night.
It had an influence. It bound to have.
Yeah, it did. I think it was well liked in America, especially. They liked what I was doing there.
The Cracked Actor period, which you must have found amusing. If only the look of bewilderment on the faces of US TV hosts and pundits. What were they making of you? It was pure theatre.
I think they still have much the same kind of feeling about me. They're not quite sure where I fit in. And
really?
Probably I've not got much to do with rock music, but I'm still a bit of a thorn in their side.
Really?
Yeah, because I keep
Honestly?
going back.
So, is this how you see it?
Yeah.
I mean, back then it was pure theatre, cabaret, kabuki masks and the works.
Yes, it wasn't it's not purist, you see. I mean, it's not sort of a kid getting up there and singing his guts out with a guitar.
I think you're proud of that young American period.
I am very much.
And so many artists to follow.
Well, of course, a long-term relationship that came out of that was, I guess, Carlos Alomar, who's working with me as we talk. He's still with me.
Many artists to follow were eclectic of that Bowie era.
But that was a hell of a band. I mean, within that band, I had Luther Vandross and Dave Sanborn, both in the same band, and Carlos Alomar. It was quite wonderful.
I think you and David Sylvian were separated at birth. It's a carbon copy, really, in his attire, and countless other stars in their music. So really, a pillar. David Bowie's a pillar.
The sartorial hooks of it all.
Yeah.
They pulled in just behind the bridge. He lays her down. He frowns. Gee, my life's a funny thing. Am I still too young kissed the van there. She took his ring, took his babies. It took him minutes, took her nowhere. Heaven knows he'd have taken anything. All night. She wants a young American. Young American, young American. She wants the young American. All night. But she wants the young American. Standing right through the picture window, she finds a slinky vagabond. He calls as he passes a Ford Mustang, but heaven forbid she take anything but the freak and his title for nothing. This is a step and cuts his hand, but showing nothing. It swoops like a song. She cries, where have all Papa's heroes gone? All night. She wants a young American. Young American, young American. She wants the young American. All right. Well, she wants the young American. All the way from Washington. Her breadwinner begs off the bathroom floor. We live for just these 20 years till we have to die for the 50 more. And all night, he wants the young American. Young American, yes, it does. He wants the young American. All right, but he wants the young American. Do you remember your President Nixon? Do you remember the bills you have to pay, or even yesterday? Have you been on America? Just you and your idle simple sets so loud. Leather everywhere, and not a miss left from the ghetto. Well, would you carry your visa? Just in case of depression. Sit on your hands on the bus of survivors, blushing at all the Afro-Sheeners. Ain't that close to love? Well, ain't that close to love? Well, it ain't that Barbie doll. Her heart's been broken just like you and all night. What the young American? Young American, young American. You want the young American? All right, you want the young American. You ain't a pimp, you ain't a horse. A pimp's got a canyon, a lady got a Chrysler. Black's got the Spectre, white's got a Soul Train. Mama's got cramps and look at your handshake.
I heard the news today, oh boy.
I got a sweet and you got the feet. Is there a man who can say no more? Is there a woman I can suck on the jaw? Is there a child I can hope with that judging? Is there a band that will write before they die? Ain't you proud that you stuck our faces? Ain't there one damn song that can make me break down and cry? All night, I want the young American.
Young American,
The young American.
I want the young American.
Oh, I want the young American. Young American.
Young American,
I want what you want.
I want the
I want what you want. You want what I want you. You want I want you want. I want what you want.
young American.
You want what I want. You want and all I want is a young American.
Yeah. After the huge commercial success of the Let's Dance, there was the obligatory absence of about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Then the critics were saying fluffy albums were to follow in '87, like Tonight and Never Let Me Down.
Yes.
They say he's lost it.
That's right, yeah.
Why?
Um,
What I think,
well, they weren't terribly good, were they?
well, I feel this. Now, I don't know whether you agree or not. I feel that they were albums of quality, really. Somehow, some way, they got sanitized in the commercial process of the products, say, for TOTP and the programs around the world like that. They made it commercial. commercially viable.
Yes, that was the irony, of course. They did sell awfully well, probably better than the albums that really were at my heart, like Low and Lodger and Heroes and all those things.
Oh, well, yeah.
But Never Let Me Down and Tonight did extremely well. And I guess I would look back and say that there were some songs that weren't too bad on them, but I was struck with indifference, unfortunately, and I didn't really follow through. I left an awful lot of it to the musicians and the producers that I was working on it at the time.
Yeah. Do you think perhaps...
My interest didn't really come back until I met Reeves Gabrels in the late 80s.
That's the Tin Machine.
Yeah, and we started working on that great experiment. Yeah.
Do you feel that on the albums from 87 to around about 1990, do you think if they'd been left in original demo form, that they would have sold as many as they did? Possibly not.
Isn't that interesting? Yes, I don't know. I guess they did fit the time and the place. They sounded right.
Yeah.
But again, they don't have. There's nothing of longevity about the sound. I mean, it's very much of its moment. It does sound hollow now, listening back in retrospect.
Well, looking at the commercial field, as we just spoke about, this worked well though with Nile Rodgers on the '83 album Let's Dance.
Well, that was an altogether different kind of thing. I wouldn't put it in with those other two, you see. I mean, there were things on that album, in fact, which I'm actually thinking of doing on, if not this tour, but maybe the European tour next year. Things like Ricochet, which in their own way were really quite experimental. I mean, that was a real interesting piece of music. And virtually, I mean, even China Girl was kind of an odd song to be in the charts. It had a very strange lyric, a very Iggy lyric, which indeed it was. I mean, it was something that we wrote together for the Idiot album. And there were other tracks on there that I thought were really quite experimental in their own way. But because the entire sound was like trying to move R&B in a kind of a strangely European direction.
Right.
So that one it is very much on its own, Let's Dance. It's almost in its own genre. And from that, of course, slightly later that year, the idea of using a blues guitarist against a kind of, a hard rock guitarist against a rhythm and blues thing was very much part of the Thriller sound, the Michael Jackson thing. In fact, came along to see 3 or 4 of the shows at the time, the Serious Moonlight thing.
Yeah. Well, I just feel that most of the critics, the harsher ones, were saying, I guess, words to this effect, that moving on from 83 to the Never Let Me Down period, it was like retrograde.
I know, they really got quite stuck around Scary Monsters, which was 1980. I think they quite liked that, and they wanted me to stay there.
Oh, yes.
Probably.
Yeah.
Possibly. I don't know.
Well, Tin Machine brings relief, I guess, of sorts, with a bunch of guys. It seemed to me like a bunch of guys in a room hanging out, letting rip with almost adolescent vigour, and yet you became serious about the Tin Machine project. This is 1992-ish.
No, much earlier than that. 1988 we actually got together. We finished in 1990.
Right.
At the end of 1990, we were all over already.
Oh, really?
So it was, I think, really a late 80s band.
1990.
Maybe 91 was the last album that came out.
You were a busy bloke then, because in 1990, the worldwide Sound and Vision Tour comes along, where we, the public, we take part in an international phone-in to decide what DB performs on the said tour. And all the favourites. And you were quoted, sadly, I don't know if this is true, you're quoted as saying something like, as each night goes by on the Sound and Vision Tour, I'm one day closer to not having to sing Ground Control to Major Tom.
Yes, unfortunately, I did feel pretty much like that.
But they were the favourites, though.
Yes, they were. Yes.
They were the ones that made or broke you, I guess.
No, I don't think so, you see, because I think I'm made of the substance of effort that I put in and the kind of... the way that I shifted music. I think hits are just hits. Songs, individual songs are just songs. I think it was the notion behind the work that I've done that, to me, is more important than the actual songs themselves. It's about moving music along. And that, for me, is something I would wish to... If I would like anything about what I've done to be remembered, it would be more in terms of what I did to modern music. Rather than the actual sort of songs that kind of music produced.
Good. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you've aired that because it clears a few things up, really. So you will be reneging on this hopefully for the outside tour. You'll be like.
Well, I'm certainly doing lots of my old songs, but they're not the hits. I mean, they're kinds of things that I guess people who are fairly into my music will quite like that I'm doing. Things like Breaking Glass from the Low album,
Good.
Teenage Wildlife from Scary Monsters, and Scary Monsters itself, of course.
Good.
But I'm not doing things like Let's Dance and Heroes and Changes and
Okay.
Genie and all the rest.
Black Tie, White Noise. Back working with Nile Rodgers again, were you?
Yes, I was indeed.
Yeah. Back on the grave.
Slightly different style then, because again, the texture of it was
Yeah.
fairly experimental. It was there were some nice ideas on that one. That's
Yeah.
a favourite album of mine.
Doing for the saxophone what Rolf Harris did for stylophone. By the way, was that you on the sax?
Absolutely.
You do
What
play.
I started doing and what I was doing on that one was, again, I was trying to treat it electronically, so I had lots of foot pedals, so the saxophone was going through a bunch of really strange devices to make it not sound like a saxophone.
I think you look good and you had good fun on that record.
That was everything this in the 90s I've really, really enjoyed doing, from the Tin Machine albums through Black Tie, and then probably my favourite album that I've made in many, many years was called Buddha of Suburbia,
Oh, yes,
which
yeah.
I think probably is really when I picked up the thread of what I was doing in the late 70s again, which virtually led to Outside Up.
You've taken risks, every so often in your career, different directions, every turnabout, experimentations. It's been brave, and when you think of all the numerous artists who have enjoyed long and illustrious careers like yourself, but they've taken a different, a more orthodox route, and they've even tried and tested, they've even released their greatest hits again. Who excites you around at the moment?
Well, I tend to look toward whoever's really messing about with the music more than anything, and trying to sort of screw it up or do something with it.
Yeah.
In that way. For that reason, my two favourite artists, I guess at the moment, have been the Scott Walker new album, which is called Tilt, which came out about 6 months ago, I think.
Okay.
And I like Tricky's work very much indeed. I think Tricky's great.
Morrissey seems like a sensible prop, if that's the right word, to support you on the Outside tour.
Well, I think it makes for a very good show. It's quite full,
Yeah.
and it's a fairly decent example of writing in the United Kingdom at the moment, I suppose.
Absolutely, one of the greatest wordsmiths, I think, of the
Yes, he
80s
is.
and the
Fabulous.
90s.
Yeah.
So it's you're coming to the King's Hall here in Belfast. on
Yes,
the
and I
5th.
can't wait. December the 5th, I believe.
People have been waiting for this for years.
Good, I can't wait to get there, and in fact the whole band are very excited about it, but me particularly. And Reeves Gabrels, of course, who's done Ireland with me, and we did a lot of work in Dublin a few years ago, and I think he quite got a taste for Ireland, so
Well, I
it'd be
think-
quite nice to go to Belfast, where neither of us have ever been.
Absolutely. I think a warm welcome awaits David Bowie in
We look
Belfast.
forward to it very much indeed.
Any regrets, David?
No,
Strictly musically,
not a one, I'm afraid. No, I kind of...
you've lived life
I
to the
plod
full.
along with a sack full of enjoyment. frankly.
Hardly plodding, David, hardly plodding.
Well, today, believe me, it's plodding.
I don't know, from Ziggy Stardust to Bing Crosby, and now it's Outside, the album. I've been listening to the album, and I don't know how to describe it.
Well, I think that's probably as well.
Good.
If it could be possibly just enjoyable. There's a good one.
Yeah.
Listen, Gene, I've got to shift now. Move on.
David, you're a star.
Oh, thank you very much.
I'm sure you're tired, so we'll let you go.
I'll see you there.
Thanks for taking the time.
All right.
Thank you, David. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.